So let's begin tonight with what appears to be a disturbing rise in insecurity here in Nigeria. Militant cells and rampaging gunmen have suddenly reappeared in considerable force in the northeastern and north-central regions. In Borno State, there have been more frequent clashes between militant Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters and the military, and dozens of soldiers have been reportedly killed. And beyond the combat engagements, local reports suggest there are a growing number of sieges on villages in the northeast, and even IED explosions are reportedly making a comeback. In the north-central region, the people of Plateau State have been trying to absorb the shock of the latest spate of horrific killings. Both the governors of Plateau and Borno states have been calling for urgent federal interventions. But President Tinubu has been reading the riot act to Governor Muftwang of Plateau State, calling on him to restore a sense of safety, as if it were simply up to the governor. Meanwhile, another Tinubu official, the Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, has been engaged in a war of words with the governor of Borno State, Babagana Zulum, over the governor's warning that the resurgence of Boko Haram and ISWAP is something to watch very closely. So, with insecurity deepening, is there a need for bigger reinforcements to be deployed to these latest front lines, or has the military become systematically weakened by too many conflicts across Nigeria? Well, for his important assessment, I'm joined now in the studio by Major General Rogers Nicholas, retired, former theatre commander of Operation Safe Haven in Plateau State, as well as the counter-insurgency Operation Lafia Dole in the northeast. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you very much.
We're actually very, very happy to have you here because you know a lot more about these things than most people. You were in charge of operations in both Plateau State and Borno State. Let me start with Plateau State. Why has it suddenly become unsafe again in your assessment?
Well, thank you very much. The issue is that the Plateau on its own is a special state. And if you're looking at the geographical situation of the Plateau, you find out that Plateau is surrounded by areas that have issues with conflict over the years, from Benue, Nasarawa, Southern Kaduna, and part of Bauchi, Taraba, things like that. But at a particular time where the military was almost through the situation in Plateau, but you know that there has to be consistency in these operations. If you give gap, people will come back. And there are so many things I need to put in place. When I was commander in Jos, we had so many things. One is continuous town hall meeting with the various people. You need to engage the various communities to find out what is their problem and why they do what they're doing. And in some places, you get to know that the people will tell you that there's absence of governance in their places. There's no water, there's no health centers and things like that. And I, as a commander, had to look inward my own resources to provide some of those things.
And that's not your job, is it?
Of course, it's not my job, but I had to do that so that I can achieve some level of peace and then a level of confidence from the people. Because once you provide for them, you are likely to become their administrator, kind of. And I had that to the extent that when there were issues, they call me and we get along with it. Secondly, is that the intelligence is poor. You have to have local intelligence. Outside the official government intelligence, the commanders on the ground must have their own local intelligence to be able to assess the situation as quickly as possible. Intelligence costs money.
But why? I was going to ask you, why is that intelligence absent?
Well, you see, as a commander, when I was the commander, command is style. You design your style how you want to achieve your success. I designed my style the way I want to achieve success by creating certain things outside the box. You know, I had my own intelligence, paid local intelligence to get me information. So you go into the enemy territory and grab information from them. And you can use that for your operation. But having said that, some of the government policies are not helping matters. When you start defining people as herdsmen, some bandits, some terrorists, there's confusion along the line. You ask yourself, who is a terrorist? What is the characteristic of the bandits? What is the characteristic of the IPOP? What is the characteristic of the killer headsmen now? We use and Boko Haram, all the same character, operating in the same frame, but in different zones.
Right. So you're saying they're essentially wearing the same hat.
Exactly.
But they're being categorized differently.
So when you do that, even the national security policy did not capture anything as about banditry. It says terrorist. So everybody in this group is a terrorist. So we must redefine these situations and make sure that government must redefine it and say, look, everybody is and be treated as that. I'll give an example. Since we started this war on terrorism, how many people have been prosecuted?
Very few.
Very few. I remember there was a time was it from UAE, they brought back some people who are sponsors of terrorists, and then nothing happened. We've seen it, and it's very discouraging. Then you see our soldiers are being killed every now and then. Of course, how much a soldier has been paid? You are paying a soldier 50,000 naira to go and die, because that's his salary.
Yeah, it's certainly not worth it.
Of course, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So now you see campaigns in the newspaper that people from the Southeast don't want to join the military. Why must the man join the military for 50,000 naira a month salary when even if he's selling pure water, he can make 50,000 naira a month conveniently? So I haven't said that. What I'm trying to say is that the military has to do more in the Plateau. More boots on the ground, more equipment, more technology, use of technology, drones and other things that can give you early warning information about what the enemy is doing.
And give it the upper hand.
Yes,
in
so that you can act before the people strike.
Well, I wonder what you think then. I mean, finish what you were saying. Sorry.
Yes, so the military need to put more books on the ground. Then you need to cover strategic areas. These people come from some places. They're not spirit. If you look at the topography of Jos, between Jos and Kaduna State and Nasarawa State, there's a high ground that run across, a range of high grounds. So, and when you cross this high ground, you are into Plateau, or you are into Southern Kaduna, or you are into Nasarawa State. So the people come from these general areas, and they cross over easily, and then when they finish operation, they go back. So there is need for us to deploy technology to monitor activities along this area that will perceive that these people are coming from. And then the military has to also put boots on the ground. I know the military has been trying. It's not been easy for the security agencies. The land mass is big. Even if you're talking about Plateau.
But if you use technology, that gives you an advantage.
So you can close the gaps.
Absolutely. And then you've got rapid deployment forces that can move at short notice.
Very good.
And are well equipped.
Of course, if you have technology to do that, you must also equip men that will do
Absolutely.
that. And they have to be properly trained to do that.
Well, let me ask you this then, because President Tinubu sent a cautionary note to the governor of Plateau State, Caleb Muftwang, to get a grip on the security situation in his state. I don't know what your assessment is, but how is he supposed to do that when he doesn't control the armed forces? Or is there a sense that, as you were mentioning earlier, you were yourself on your own, were doing a lot of mediation? Is there a need for him to have done more of that? I mean, to reduce ethnic and religious tensions in the state, which are said to often fuel the conflict, as well as poverty that you mentioned.
Yeah, what the governor can do is to engage the various ethnic groups, the various religious groups within the state, okay? Consistently engaging them and finding out why are they doing what they're doing. There's a reason why people are doing what they're doing. People don't just wake up and kill people. There's a reason for it. Is the issue of land grabbing? Is the issue of farmland? So those things need to be addressed comprehensively so that people can have peace.
And that would be the job of the governor.
That is the job of the state governor. Then the military also have a role to play. The security agencies as a whole, the DSS, the police, the military, they all have roles to play because the military itself, the army itself cannot do that job alone. So you need the cooperation of everybody. And then sharing intelligence, like I said, we have the normal strategic intelligence, but the commanders on the ground should have their own local intelligence to be able to grab early warning information from what is happening on the ground.
So broadly speaking, I mean, just tapping into your knowledge base, which you clearly have a lot of, I mean, is security on the local and state level levels the responsibility of the state governments or the federal government? Because the governor is supposed to be the chief security officer, but he has no control over the armed forces, does he?
That is a constitutional matter. These are constitutional matters that need to be reviewed so that the governors can have at least some level of control over some security agencies. For instance, the police, the DSS in the state, the Defense National NSDC should come under the state government control completely. You understand? To enable them to act so that the federal government can only be responsible to the military. So when these ones fail, then the military can come in. But when the governor does not have control of any of the security agencies, what do you want him to do? You know, we've had issues where some commissioners of police disrespect the state governors, and when you give them instruction, they say they will not take, they take orders from Abuja. So these are constitutional matters that need to be looked into properly, and that's why you can really empower the governor if you say he's the security officer of the state. Otherwise, remove him from being security of the state. Let's know that the federal government is in charge of the security of the state.
And that's this comprehensive assessment that you're talking about,
Yes.
that security must be looked at holistically.
Holistically. It has to be looked holistically. And then point out there are sponsors of all these issues happening in this country. And I'm sure, definitely sure that the government knows some of these sponsors. But we are not holding them responsible. So if you don't hold them responsible, it becomes a game.
Yes, I'm going to come to that in a minute, but let me ask you that, because some military analysts have suggested that the long-running battles that the military has been engaged in across Nigeria, in the north central, northeast, northwest, southeast, all these are affecting the performance of the military. In other words, they are being systematically drained and weakened and spread thinly by so many conflicts in Nigeria. Is that a fact? Are they being overwhelmed?
Yeah, you can say that the military somehow is overwhelmed by the situation in the country. That is obvious. Because you have 36 states and the military are engaging all the 36 states, including FCT. So when you do that, how many soldiers do you have on the ground? How many policemen do you have on the ground? So the soldiers are overwhelmed. And the land mass of Nigeria is so big that you can't even have boots on the ground to call. So that's why we talk about technology. Technology has to come in.
That is absolutely necessary.
Absolutely necessary. Then equipment, more than the platforms need to come in. Then training. But one important thing is the community resilience effort. The local community must understand that this country belongs to all of us. You know, the government, NOAA, Orientation Agency, should carry out a campaign, grassroots campaign, making people understand that, look, this country belongs to all of us. If there's no country, there'll be nobody. So people must understand that this country belongs, and then they'll be wholly responsible for what happens.
But that must go hand in hand with things like poverty alleviation.
Of
because
course,
for people to feel they have a stake,
of course,
they must have a sense that they're benefiting from that.
Of course, that is why government should carry out a lot of infrastructural development, reduce poverty level, create job for people. One of the major problems, like for instance, in the Northeast, is there are no jobs, no employment. Poverty level is high. Inflation is high. Cost of living is high. Like in Burundi now, the cost of food in Northeast has risen by over 300% inflation-wise. And then the production of food has grown by almost 49.9% in Burundi, in Northeast.
And do you think that is maybe or certainly responsible for the resurgence of Boko Haram and ISWAP in Borno State? I mean, that's another state where you led the military operation there, because the governor of Borno State is begging for military support, warning that terror is back in force there.
You ask yourself, why are people being radicalized? One of the issues is issue of poverty. Lack of job creation, lack of wealth creation, and then there is an educational gap.
Yes.
Within these areas. So once you have this is playing out, and then there's an alternative. Boko Haram creates an alternative. I can give you this that the government is not giving you. So people are enticed to go there. So government has a lot to do by creating job, creating employment, reducing poverty. Look at our borders. You can't even move foodstuff. For instance, from the Lake Chad basin area, you can't even move fish to the town because the roads have been taken over by Boko Haram.
But the government would then argue that until they get that security situation under control, they technically cannot actually improve the lives of the people.
That is why the federal government has to come on board. The security of Nigeria as a whole rests with the federal government. The Ministry of Defense has to come on board to do more than it's doing now. The military is doing so much, and the military people are tired. The soldiers are tired. Some soldiers have spent 4 years, 5 years in the theater of operation. Who does that?
And every time you go back, there's a risk to your life, isn't there?
It's not as well. The military job is risky all through, particularly when there are operations. But what we're saying that we don't have enough boots on the ground in the Northeast now. We don't have enough equipment on the ground, technology particularly in the Northeast. So these are the issues. Now, the terrain is so wide, the land space is so massive that you can't just cover it on books on the ground. So, and the Boko Haram has a very strategic way of doing things. They're tactics. Now, they operate in two phases. One, farming season, they attack. They attack. Grab food for themselves, kidnap so many people and make money. Now, before the rainy season starts, they reemerge again to be able to get food, because once the rainy season starts, getting food becomes an issue. So before the rainy starts, and that's what's happening now. They are reemerging all over, trying to collect food, trying to collect whatever they can get. So
that's partly what's responsible for this research.
Yes.
Right.
So trying to get food stuff for themselves that will sustain them till the next. So these are the tactics that Boko Haram is doing. So, but the governments, the federal government and the military or the security agencies have a lot to do.
Right. And I mean, you know, we've been talking mostly about Plateau and Borno states, essentially north central and northeastern regions. But there is serious crime and conflict across other parts of Nigeria, aren't there? I mean, that's a huge job.
Yes, if you go to the southeast, you have the issues of all these criminals, IPOB, or whatever it is. All these people are terrorists and should be treated as such. So the government has a responsibility, you know, to also carry out a propaganda campaign to assuage some of these people to change their heart stance. That is the policy across the world. The military cannot do this alone, like I've said earlier on. Everybody, it has to be a national holistic program.
In other words, the government needs to build the confidence of the people in the government.
Exactly. You know, every state governor, every local government must understand that this country belongs to all of us. And then people should be treated equally across board. You know, one thing that creates problem is when some people feel that they are marginalized.
Absolutely.
They start looking for alternative. If you don't give me this, I'll look for alternative to get it. If I can't get it, I can get it by force. So this attract attention that are being marginalized. These are what happened across.
Especially with young people who are fairly gullible, aren't they?
Yeah, the young people, because there's no job. You see a graduate after finishing school, doing his NYC, no job for him. People that get job are people who are political masters are the ones that get job for their children. If you go to CBN, you go to NNPC, all these oil companies, everybody that works there belongs to one big man or the other.
It's a corrupt, nepotistic system.
Thank you. So there's a corrupt system in play, you know, and this corrupt system in play by few people is not helping the larger population. And that is why you are seeing the resurgence of crisis all over the place. So government has a responsibility to do a lot.
I have to say that that's an absolutely, you know, superb analysis that you've given us. But just returning to the Nigerian army, of which you were a part, I mean, is part of the problem that the army remains a defensive, conventional force and terror groups are employing guerrilla warfare tactics?
You know, like I said, command is style. When I was theater commander Operation Lafia, Dole, my style was comprehensive offensive operation, total offensive operation. Don't give the terrorists a breathing space. But when you have a system where you want to be defensive, it doesn't work. So the military has to change part of its tactics. What they are doing now, I don't think will help.
So you were hitting them before they I mean...
Yes, you don't even allow them to rest.
Yes.
You go around, you know, drive them around the forest, you pursue them, everybody's running around, they get tired and they get worn out. You can't tell me that Boko Haram has more vehicles than Nigerian military. It's not possible. But we need to put continuously.
Right. So you need to put the pressure on them.
Yes, put pressure on them.
And you talked earlier about the problem of intelligence gathering,
yes,
which you suggested appears to be failing. Because, I mean, as you said, you need intelligence to tackle insurgency, kidnapping, all these attacks in Plateau State. I mean, because, you know, no one seems to know, at least we don't get that information. No one seems to know who's behind these attacks. Because if you did, then presumably you would go after them and get them.
You see, the truth about this situation is that this country, Nigeria, we need to tell ourselves the truth about this. Nobody can comprehensively tell me that government officials, governors, local government chairmen, even the people in the security agencies don't know some of these people, even our politicians. How can we be dabbling with a ragtag army for more than 50 years and then up to now we are still running around them?
But I mean, you're in the first line of, if you like, capture. I mean, yes, as the head of an operation, I mean, you capture these people, and I'm sure you've captured quite a few of them.
Yes.
You interview them, you interrogate them.
Yes.
What do they tell you? I mean, because I've heard that some of these people actually mention names and things, and you know, you would know that, I suppose.
Yes, we made some arrests, and then we have them over to the agency that's in charge of proper interrogation, which is the DSS.
Right.
So the DSS should know these people.
So they really drill these people.
Yes.
Because I mean, the point has been made that when you see kidnappers, for example, I mean, many of them look poor and haggard and hungry, and yet they collect tens of millions of naira. So that suggests that they are collecting the money on behalf of people who are above them. I wonder what your thoughts are.
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely correct. That's why I say there are sponsors of all these criminal gangs happening. All these terrorist groups have their sponsors. Okay, they all have their sponsors. And as long as their sponsors are allowed to get away free, other groups will emerge. We just heard about the Lacurawas that just emerged over.
Absolutely.
Because nobody was actually watching. How can Lacurawa be operating in Nigeria for 10 years and nobody knew about it? Are there no local government authorities? Are there no security agencies within the local government areas? Something is wrong. You know, we need to tell ourselves the basic truth about what is happening in this country. Some people are holding on to the facts. You know, and these are the problems we're having. And when a soldier knows that, look, how much are they paying me? And people...
And they're not even giving me the support I need.
That is it.
Yeah.
And then we arrest somebody, we give it to you, the next day, the man is acquitted, or you see the man. So many things are wrong in the system. So the government must come up with a policy to deal with this squarely, if we really want to do it.
I wish they would bring people like yourself as part of an advisory committee and actually listen to the advice that people like you have to give. But I want to thank you very much indeed. It's been absolutely illuminating sitting here and talking with you. Major General Rogers Nicholas, retired, is a former theater commander of Operation Safe Haven in Plateau State, as well as the former theater commander of the counter-insurgency Operation Lafia Dole in the Northeast. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. One more thing before I leave is that,
briefly.
There's need for the government to look into the welfare of the military.
That's an important one.
When you hear that a member of a Senate, maybe a hospital, goes on with about 30, 25 million, and a soldier goes on with 50,000 naira, what do you expect? Even I, as a retired general, how much is my salary? Just above 1 million naira. And then you have somebody who's a local government chairman, or even a councillor, who has never even gone through the 4 walls of good school.
That's a very important point,
and
I'm glad you made that point.
How many of our professors, how much have professors paid in this country?
Those are very important points, but we'll have to leave that conversation for another day. But I'm glad you got that bit in, and I do hope the right people are watching and listening. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.